15. Night enshrouded Aranok, and with its coming also returned the demon Zazax to Augustus Malevolent. The general had been waiting most anxiously for the past hour, pacing back and forth inside his tent. He had dismissed all his officers and ordered that even his guards depart from the vicinity of his quarters. As an added precaution, he had also not permitted any tents within hearing distance. What transpired between Malevolent and the Mantis would be for their ears alone. Even Galeona had been forbidden to set up her abode nearby, but she had protested little when he had told her. The general had not given that lack of protest much thought, more concerned with the offer made by his new ally. As far as he was concerned, the witch could now pack her things back up and ride off. If she did not, he would likely have to have her slain. Some sort of animosity existed between Zazax and her, and at the moment Malevolent needed the demon far more than he needed a very mortal sorceress, whatever her other charms. Women could be easily replaced. Moments of immortality generally could not be. By Malevolent's choice, only a single lamp lit the tent. He did not know if the demon cast shadows, but if so, the less chance of one of his men noticing, the better for the general. Had they known what he and the Mantis wished to discuss, they would have all likely fled into the dark desert, heedless of the dangers lurking out there. A flickering movement caught his attention. Augustus Malevolent turned, noticing that one shadow moved in defiance of the lamp's flame. "You are here, aren't you?" he murmured.
"This one has come as promised, O Great One."
The shadow deepened, grew substantial. In moments, the hideous form of the hellish Mantis loomed over the human. Yet, despite the presence of a creature who looked capable of ripping him apart limb by limb, General Malevolent felt only anticipation. In Zazax, he saw the first of many such monsters who would eventually serve him in every way.
Lutgolane lies little more than a day from you now, Warlord. Have you changed your mind?
Changed his mind about gaining the armor? Changed his mind about his destiny? You waste my time on useless prattle, Zazax. I am firm in my choice. The bulbous yellow orbs flared. The Mantis's head twisted slightly, as if the demon tried to peer through the closed tent flap.
We spoke briefly of the witch, Great Warlord. This one has considered that matter much since then, and believes still that she must not be part of this, or perhaps anything else.
Augustus Malevolent pretended to brood over this. She's been of value to me for some time. I would hate to lose her assets.
She would not agree with what this one has proposed to you, Warlord. You may trust this one on that.
The general had not missed Zazax's continual use of the new title, and while it pleased Malevolent to hear it, the demon in no way succeeded in playing to his ego. Malevolent still considered each detail by its own worth, even Galeona. What lies between you and her?
An agreement made foolishly, and one this one wishes to break.
Not the most clear of answers, but enough to give the general what he needed. He had a possible bargaining chip. You will give me all I demand, all we discussed.
All, and gladly, Warlord.
Then you may have her now, if you wish. I will wait here while you do what you must. If the demon could possibly ever have looked disconcerted, then he did so now.
This one most graciously declines your kind offer, Warlord, and suggests that perhaps you take the honor yourself. at some point soon.
The mantis would not, or could not, touch Galeona, just as Malevolent had expected. Still, to him the matter seemed moot. It would not change his other decision, not in the least. I will send a detachment to her tent to see that she remains under control. That will at least prevent her from causing any disturbance during our efforts. Perhaps after, I will decide what to do about her. In the meantime, unless there is something else you need to tell me, I would like to begin. The eyes of the demon flashed again, this time in what seemed immense satisfaction. In that voice that reminded the general of a dying swarm of flies, Zazax replied,
Then you will need this, warlord.
In the two skeletal hands, the hellish mantis held a large, twin-bladed dagger, made of a black metal, a dagger with runes etched not only in the handle but along the flat sides of the blades. Also in the handle had been embedded two stones, the larger as red as blood, the other as pale as bone. Both stones had a slight gleam to them that came from no outside source.
Take it,
urged the demon. Augustus Malevolent did so, with eagerness, hefting the massive knife and noting its fine balance.
What must I do with it? Prick the skin. Let a few drops of blood flow.
The mantis cocked his head.
A simple matter.
Dagger in hand, the general hurried to the flap of the tent. He shouted for one of his officers, then glanced over his shoulder at Zazax. You'd better fade back into... But the demon had already anticipated his request, Zazax melting once more into shadow. A thin, mustached soldier with silver tabs on his shoulders appeared out of the darkness. He rushed up to the tent, then saluted his commander. Yes, General? Zacco, one of his more competent aides. Malevolent would miss him, but the potential glories outweighed any concern for a single person. The witch is to be placed under protective arrest. She is not to be allowed to touch any of her belongings, nor is she to even so much as raise a finger until I say so. A grim smile crossed the other soldier's face. Like most of Malevolent's officers, Zacco had no love for this sorceress who had, up until now, influenced their leader so much. Aye, General, I'll do that all right. Something occurred to the commander. But first bring the guards chosen for this task here. Be quick about it. With a swift salute, Zacco vanished into the dark, only to return a short time later with 4 sturdy-looking warriors. Zacco ushered them into Malevolent's tent, then took up his place at the forefront. All present, General, he called out, snapping to attention. Very good. Malevolent gave the small troop a brief inspection, then faced them. You have all served me loyally, time and time again. His fingers stroked the hilt of the dagger, to which none of the 5 had so far paid much attention. You have sworn your lives to me more than once, and for that I thank you. However, with a prize such as the one awaiting us, I must ask of you one last show of your willingness to serve me unto death. To one side, General Malevolent noticed a shadow move. Zazax no doubt grew impatient, not understanding the need for the short speech. These men would be the first. Therefore, from them would spread word of why their leader now demanded this new proof from them. Tomorrow begins a day of glory, a day of destiny, and each of you shall play an integral part. I ask now, my friends, that you verify my faith in you, my hopes in you, with this one last oath. He held up the dagger for all of them to see. A couple of the guards blinked, but no one otherwise reacted. Zacco, I give you the honor of being the first. Show me your bravery. Without hesitation, the mustached officer stepped up and thrust out his ungloved hand. This had not been the first time he had sworn a blood oath to his commander, and of the 5, only he no doubt thought that he understood why Malevolent desired to re-emphasize to the men the loyalty they owed the general. "Palm up!" After Zacco had obeyed, Malevolent held the dagger points down over the fleshiest part, then jabbed his officer's palm. Zacco stifled a gasp, the man keeping his eyes straight ahead, as had been expected of him. Because of that, he did not notice something strange about both the knife and where it had punctured his skin. The 2 gems in the hilt briefly flashed the moment the points pierced his hand. More curious, although blood flowed from the tiny wounds, little of it actually spread over the palm, most of it seeming drawn toward the black blade, where it then disappeared. "Have yourself a sip of wine, Zacco," Malevolent offered, pulling back the dagger. As his aide stepped away, the general signaled to the next man, upon whom he repeated the same process. After all 5 had been bled, Augustus Malevolent saluted them. "You have given me your lives. I promise to treat them as the valuable gifts they are. You are dismissed." As the soldiers departed, he called to Zacco, "Before you deal with the witch, have Captain Lyconius bring every man under his command to my tent, will you?" "Aye, General." When the others had gone, the voice of Zazax drifted from the shadows.
"This goes too slow, Warlord. It will take days at this rate."
"No. Now it will go much faster. These 5 have been given an honor, so they see it. Zacco will tell Lyconius, and he in turn will tell his men, and so on. I will order the officers to give a ration of drink to each soldier who shows them he has once more sworn his life to my cause. The pace will quicken incredibly, I promise you." A few seconds later, Lyconius, a thin, fair-haired man older than the general, asked to be admitted. Outside, every soldier under his command awaited. Malevolent bled the captain first, then had him line the men up. The mention of a ration of drink afterward made each fighter all the more eager to be there. However, only a few of Lyconius's men had been dealt with when Zacco, looking much perturbed, burst into the tent. He knelt on one knee before the commander, head down in shame. Somewhat irritated at this costly interruption, General Malevolent barked, "Speak! What is it?" "General, the witch. She is nowhere to be found." Malevolent tried to conceal his annoyance. "Her belongings, are they still in the tent?" "Aye, General, but her horse is missing." Even Galeona would not ride out into the vast desert at night. Taking a casual glance over his shoulder, Malevolent noticed the shadow of the demon shift. No doubt Zazax did not find this news pleasant either, but at the moment neither man nor demon could afford to waste time on her. If the sorceress had somehow learned of their intention and had chosen to flee, it truly mattered little in the long run to her former lover. What harm could she do? Perhaps once he wore the armor, he would hunt her down. But now Malevolent had more important concerns. "Never mind her, Zacco. Return to your normal duties." Relief in his voice, the aide thanked him, then hurried from the tent. General Malevolent turned back to his task, bleeding the next man, then commending him for his bravery. The pace did indeed quicken, just as he had told the mantis it would. The combination of honor and drink caused a line to spread throughout the entire encampment, each man anxious to prove his worth to his master and his fellows. Tomorrow, they felt, the general would lead them to a glorious victory and riches beyond their wildest dreams. That they might be too few to take a stronghold such as Lut Ghislaine did not occur to them. General Malevolent would not have made the sudden decision, so they assumed, if he did not already have some battle plan ensuring success. And deep into the night, the last man proved his loyalty, hand out, the dagger already pricking his palm. The final soldier and the officer who had guided him in both departed after saluting their trusted leader. From without, Augustus Malevolent could already hear the sounds of celebration as each of his men savored their ration of drink and toasted their future good fortunes.
"It is done,"
rasped Zazax, emerging from the shadowy corners.
"Each and every one has tasted the dagger's bite, and of each and every one the dagger has sipped."
Turning the ceremonial weapon over and over in his hands, the general commented, "Not a single drop, not the tiniest stain. Where did all the blood go?"
"Each to its own, warlord. Each to the one it must go. This one promised you an army against whom even Lutgolain could not defend long. Remember?"
"I recall." He touched the helmet, which he had not taken off once since camp had been made. It seemed so much a part of him now that he swore it would never leave his side, that he would only remove it for necessity's sake. "And I say again, I accept the consequences of our deal." The mantis's body dipped in what might have been an acknowledging bow.
"Then there is no reason not to proceed immediately."
"Tell me what must be done."
"In the sand at your feet, you must draw this symbol."
Using one of the skeletal hands, Zazax traced the mark in the air. The general's eyes widened slightly as the demon's gaunt finger left a fiery orange trail behind, highlighting the symbol. "Why don't you just do it?"
"It must be done by he who will command. Would you prefer it to be this humble one, warlord?"
Seeing Zazax's point, Malevolent bent down and drew the mark, as it had appeared in the air. To his surprise, as he completed it, strange words suddenly burst from his lips.
"Do not hesitate," urged the mantis eagerly. "The words were known to him. They will be known to you."
His words. Bartek's words. Augustus Malevolent let them flow, savoring the power he felt from their use.
"Hold the dagger over the center."
When the general had done that, the demon added,
"Now, speak the name of my infernal lord. Speak the name of Belial."
"Belial? Who is Belial? I know of Baal and Mephisto and Diablo, but not of this Belial. Do you mean
"Speak not that name again,"
Zazax nervously chittered. The mantis twisted his horrific head left and right, as if he feared discovery by someone. Evidently finding nothing upon which to base that fear, the demon finally responded in calmer tones.
"There is no master in hell save Belial. It is he who offers you this wondrous gift. Recall this always."
More familiar with the magic arts than the mantis might think him, Malevolent knew that hell had once been described as being ruled by the three prime evils. Yet he also knew of legends which had told of the three brothers cast up onto the mortal plane, their rule over hell a thing of the past. In fact, one of the more obscure legends mentioned Lutgolain as the possible location of Baal's tomb, although even the general doubted the veracity of such a fantastic tale. Who would build a city on top of a demon lord's tomb? "As you say, Zazax, Belial it is. I simply wanted to get the name correct."
"Begin again,"
the monstrous insect snapped. Once more the words spilled from Malevolent's tongue. Once more he held the vampiric dagger high above the center of the symbol. Belial's symbol, the general now realized. At the end of the incantation, the eager commander called out the demon lord's name.
plunge the dagger into the center. Exactly.
General Malevolent drove the twin-tipped blade deep into the sand, catching the center of the image perfectly. Nothing happened. He looked up at the looming horror.
Step back,
Zazak suggested. And as the would-be conqueror did, a grim black haze arose around the dagger. While the two watched, the haze rapidly grew, first expanding above the weapon, then finally spreading toward the tent flap. As it drifted outside with what seemed definite purpose to Malevolent's trained eye, the foreboding haze took on the shape of what looked to be a huge, clawed hand.
It will not be long now, Warlord.
Unconcerned, Malevolent sought out a goblet of his finest wine. For this night, he chose a new bottle, one that had been packed carefully for countless journeys over desperate landscapes. The general opened it, sniffed the contents, and, with much approval, poured himself a full cup. At that point, the first of the screams began. Augustus Malevolent's hand shook at the sound, but not because of any fear or regret. It was just that he had never heard such a soul-tearing cry, not even from those he had tortured, and the suddenness of it had simply startled the hardened veteran. When the second, the third, and fourth arose, Malevolent found them not at all disconcerting. He even raised his goblet toward the half-buried dagger and Zazax's unseen lord. And as he did, the shrieks outside became a chorus of the damned, scores of men crying out at the same time, pleading for some escape. From all around the camp, the agonized screams assaulted the general, but he took each in stride. The men, his men, had each sworn more than one oath that they would serve him in all things, in all ways. Tonight, he had taken that oath to heart, accepting their sacrifices, quite literally, for the better of his quest. He turned toward the tent flap again. Mistaking the human's reaction, the mantis warned,
It is too late to save them. The pact has been accepted by this one's infernal lord.
Save them? I merely wish to toast them for what they have given in order to garner me my destiny.
Ah,
responded the demon, clearly seeing the true General Malevolent for the first time.
This one is mistaken.
And on went the screams. A few sounded quite distant, as if some of the men had tried to flee, but they could not flee from something eating away at them from within their very souls. Some, obviously very loyal, called out to their commander, pleading for help. Malevolent poured himself another goblet, then sat down to wait for the finish. Gradually, the last of the screams died down, leaving only the nervous whinnying of the horses, who could not understand what had happened. That too, though, ceased, as the heavy silence of the camp affected them as well. The sudden clank of metal against metal made him look at the demon again, but Zazax said nothing. Outside, the clanking increased, growing both in intensity and nearness. General Malevolent finished the last of his wine and stood up. The noise outside abruptly stopped.
They await you, Warlord.
Adjusting his armor, especially his helmet, General Augustus Malevolent stepped outside. They did indeed wait for him, their ranks perfect. Several held torches so he could see their faces, the faces he had come to know so well over their years of service to him. They all stood there, Zacco, Lyconius, and the rest of the officers, each with their men behind them. As he stepped into their sight, a cry of salute rose up among the throng, a cry monstrous, brutal in its tone. It made Malevolent smile, just as a somewhat closer glance at the foremost visages further enthused the commander. No matter how dark or light their skins had been before, they now had a pale, pasty look to them. As for their mouths, their battle cry had revealed teeth, now fanged, and tongues long and forked. The eyes were completely red, blood red, and burned with such evil desire that they could be seen even without the aid of a torch. They were not human eyes, but rather eyes that, at least in malignance, more resembled those of the mantis. Garbed in the very husks of his loyal soldiers, these horrific warriors would be his new legion, his path to glory. Zazax joined him outside the tent, the hellish mantis no longer needing to be concerned about secrecy. After all, here he stood among his own.
All hail Malevolent of Westmarch, Zazax called out. All hail the warlord of blood.
And once again, the demonic horde cheered Augustus Malevolent. So far from the encampment, Galeona heard nothing, but the witch did sense the striking of the sinister spell. Long associated with the darker aspects of her art, she knew that such incredible emanations of hellish sorcery could only mean that her fears had come to fruition. She had been right to depart when she had, or else the enchantress would have certainly joined the fates of Augustus's unsuspecting warriors. Zazax had underestimated her for the last time. The mantis would have used others to deal with her in order to break the blood pact that they had made some years back. He had chosen the general for his new ally, the demon having always hinted that a new warlord would be of more interest than simply gaining empty armor. Galeona should have realized months ago that he had never intended to continue with their own alliance any longer than necessary. Yet, what had made him so suddenly choose Augustus over her? Could it really have been fear? Ever since that night when the monstrous insect had nearly done the unthinkable, slain her outright, despite the repercussions of directly breaking their pact, the witch had tried to think of what could so disturb a creature of hell. What fear had sent him scurrying straight to Malevolent? In the end, it did not matter. Both Zazax and Augustus could have one another for all she cared. After what she had discovered during her brief spell work earlier, Galeona had decided that she, in turn, needed neither of the two treacherous creatures. Why settle for always looking over her shoulder when she could be the one who truly commanded? The sorceress glanced down at her hand as she rode, not the first time she had done so. In her left palm, Galeona held a small crystal, which through spells she had tied to her intended destination. So long as the crystal glowed, the enchantress knew that she remained on the right track. So long as it glowed, she knew that she could find the fool she intended to make her puppet. In betraying her, Zazax had made one terrible error in judgment. For some reason that she could not yet fathom, the demon could not by himself detect the ancient warlord's armor. He needed human assistance, which had been one of the foremost reasons the two of them had first joined together. That had been why, when he had believed that he knew where the prize lay, the cursed mantis had abandoned her for General Malevolent. It should not have been at all surprising to her, since Galeona had considered doing much the same, but for Zazax, the error would prove a costly one. The demon no doubt believed that the armor could be found now in nearby Lutgolain, the location they had last determined it would head toward. Even she had assumed that much until her last spell. Where else could it be but within the coastal kingdom? A lone traveler either needed to find a caravan there, willing to take him on, or wait instead for a ship heading on from Lutgolain to one of the more western lands. Either way, Norak should have still been within the city walls. But he was not. At some point, he had left, choosing to forego sanity and apparently ride out into the desert at a pace that surely had killed his mount. When Galeona had discovered his new location, it had stunned her. The veteran fighter practically stood under Augustus's very nose. If the general had agreed to letting her cast a search spell when she had originally offered, the armor might very well even now be his. He could have already been approaching Lutgolain, clad in the crimson garb of Bartek, his loyal witch at his side. Instead, Galeona now hoped to convince this other fool that he should use it. Under her masterful guidance, of course. He looked to be a manageable sort of oaf, one she should readily be able to wrap around her finger. He also had a not unreasonable countenance, one in some ways the witch preferred to her former lover. That would make the task of maintaining control of her new puppet not so great a chore. Of course, if Galiona found some better method by which to harness the astonishing power of the enchantments, it would also not bother her much if she had to do away with this Norik. There were always other men, other fools. On and on she rode, her only concern that Zazax might choose to interrupt his activities with Augustus to pursue his former partner. Of course, that would go against their pact, too, which would endanger the demon as well as her. More likely, the hellish mantis would forget her for now, satisfied that he had his grand prize. Later, he would no doubt find the means by which to sever their ties, not to mention her head and limbs. He would be too late, though. Once she had her pawn ensnared, Galiona would see to it that Zazax, not she, would soon lay scattered over the landscape. Perhaps she would even have Norik bring the insect's head to her, a pretty trophy with which to begin to rebuild the collection that the sorceress had been forced to leave abandoned tonight. She peered around, looking for some sign of her prey. In order to lessen the risk of riding around nearly blind because of the darkness, the witch had cast a spell, enhancing both the visions of her horse and herself. It enabled the animal to pick a path that would avoid accidents and predators, while giving Galiona the ability to better hunt for the soldier. There, reining her mount to a halt, the sorceress stared at the distant, shadowed form of a rocky hill. The crystal indicated that her path continued directly that way. Galiona rose in the saddle for a moment, searching for any other likely spot and finding none. As a seasoned warrior, the fool certainly had enough sense to look for reasonable shelter, and the small hill before her looked to be the only such choice for many miles around. He had to be there. Eager now, Galiona urged the horse on. As they neared, she thought she saw a figure just to the left of the hill. Yes, most definitely a man, seated under an outcropping, his knees drawn up to his chest, his arms resting atop the knees. He jumped up as the witch approached, for one clad in heavy armor, his agility and speed surprising her. Galiona could see him peering back, trying to make her out in the darkness, and so far failing. No, not an unpleasant face at all, the guileful sorceress thought. Better than she had recalled from their encounter on the ship. If he would just prove himself to be reasonable, to listen to her, then they would have no troubles with one another, and she would not have to so soon begin the search for his eventual replacement. "Who is it?" Norik called. "Who are you?" She dismounted a short distance from him. "Only a fellow wanderer. No one who means you harm." Now Galiona simply used the crystal to illuminate the area, let him see the good fortune that had just stepped into his miserable little life. Someone looking for some warmth. The witch manipulated the gleaming stone, letting its light cross both her face and torso. She saw his interest immediately. So much the better. He looked to be one readily led around by the nose in return for a few readily given pleasures. The perfect dupe. His expression suddenly changed, and not for the better. "I know you, don't I?" He approached, towering over her. "I need to see your face again." "Of course." Galiona held the crystal nearer to her features. "Not enough light," Norik muttered. "I need more." He held up his left hand, and in the palm of the gauntlet there suddenly formed a tiny fireball that outshone the crystal 100-fold. Galiona could not stifle a gasp. She had expected an uninitiated fool, a fighter with no grasp of sorcery. Instead, he had summoned flame without so much as an effort, something still beyond many well-schooled apprentices. "That's better. I do know you. Your face, anyway. On the Hawk's Fire." He nodded in immense satisfaction. "I dreamed of you there." Recovering, Galiona quickly replied, "And I dreamed of you, too, that time. Dreamed of a warrior, a champion, who could protect me from the evils pursuing me." As she hoped, her words and tone had an immediate effect on the man. His look of distrust did not completely fade, but now she saw also sympathy and pride that she looked at him as her savior. The witch pressed nearer to Norik, staring adoringly into his eyes with her own half-lidded ones. She surely had him enticed by this point. "You're in danger?" A protective look crossed his face. He peered beyond Galiona, as if already expecting to see the villains who chased after her. "They don't know I escaped them just yet. I dreamed of you again last night. Knew that you had to be near, waiting for me." Putting a hand on his breastplate, Galiona leaned forward, but inches between her full lips and his own. He did not rise to the tempting bait, instead considering some other matter. "You're a sorceress," Norik finally responded. "What's your name?" "Galiona. And I know from my dreams that my knight is called Norik." "Yes." The fighter smiled at the title she had given him. "Are you a powerful sorceress?" The witch let her hand trace the seams on the armor. "I have some talent in that, and other fields as well." "I could use a sorceress," he muttered almost to himself. "I wanted one to help me deal with this armor, but that's not so important anymore. I've had time to think, time to put matters in their proper order. There's things I need to do before I go on any further." Galiona only half paid attention, already planning ahead. Norik definitely did not sound as simple a man as the enchantress had first imagined, but he had at least taken her story to heart and accepted her as a companion, if nothing else. As she learned more about him, Galiona would strengthen that tie. He had already revealed some weakness to her charms. The rest of what she desired the witch would gain soon enough. Of course, if she could help Norik with whatever concerned him, show her puppet of what valuable assistance she could be, that would shorten her own task. While Galiona did not understand his statement concerning the armor itself, these other matters he had mentioned, whatever they might be, she could surely aid him in accomplishing. "Of course, I'll help you in any way I can, my knight. I ask only in return that you protect me from those who would do me harm." She turned her gaze briefly to the desert. "They're powerful and have dark arts at their command." Galiona had wanted to test his reserve, to see the extent he felt sure of the power he apparently wielded. Yet even to her surprise, Norik shrugged, then almost casually answered, "Warriors, magic, demons, I've no fear of any of them. Those under my protection will come to no harm." "You've my gratitude," she whispered, leaning up and kissing him hard. He pulled her away, not out of any disgust, but because he seemed not to have any interest at the moment in what she had offered him. Instead, Norik appeared once more lost in his other concerns. "I've thought about it," the fighter finally told the witch. "Thought about why I ended up here, of all places. It has to be somewhere near. It tries to keep hidden, and from me it can do it." He looked down at her again, something in his eyes suddenly unnerving Galiona a little. "But you might be able to find it. You found me, after all. You can probably succeed where Dragnan failed." "I'll do what I can," the dark-skinned enchantress returned, curious as to what so demanded the man's attention. Something of value to her, too, perhaps? "What are we looking for?" His expression indicated that he found it surprising that she did not already know. "Horazan's tomb, of course." Something in his face changed as he spoke, something that made Galiona look at him again, and this time see a face that she did not entirely recognize. "My brother's tomb."